morning. Welcome to King's Report for Saturday, February 3rd, 2018, 12th month, and 18th day by the calendar. I'm Tim Elder, and we'll start with our weather this morning. It's 10 degrees outside, the area, and partly cloudy. To 29 degrees today, not quite to the freezing point. With the sun mixing with clouds, increasing clouds, down to 19 degrees tonight. With a bit of snow forecast, and actually Sunday, Monday, mostly sunny, winds at 28 degrees, and Tuesday 33 and cloudy. So it's about normal, about average winter temperatures for the next few days. And let's go to, well, yes, we need to read the memo, don't we? It's finally, the memo was released yesterday. And so let's read it so that we can start talking about it finally. And so the what we see online right now is actually a six-page document, and there's a 2-page letter from the president to Congress telling them that he is allowing it to be released, and then there's 4 pages following that. So let me just read that letter from the president first, and then we'll read the memo itself. The Honorable Devin Nunes, Chairman, House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, United States Capitol, Washington, D.C., 20515. Dear Mr. Chairman, on January 29, 2018, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, hereafter the committee, voted to disclose publicly a memorandum containing classified information provided to the committee in connection with its oversight activities. Parentheses, the memorandum, which is attached to this letter, close parentheses. As provided by Clause 11G of Rule 10 of the House of Representatives, the committee has forwarded this memorandum, to the President based on its determination that the release of the memorandum would serve the public interest. The Constitution vests the President with the authority to protect national security secrets from disclosure. As the Supreme Court has recognized, it is the President's responsibility to classify, declassify, and control access to information bearing on our intelligence sources and methods and national defense. This is interesting. It reminds us that it is within the President's power to declassify any document or information. In order to facilitate appropriate congressional oversight, the executive branch may entrust classified information to the appropriate committees of Congress, as it has done in connection with the committee's oversight activities here. The executive branch does so on the assumption that the committee will responsibly protect such classified information consistent with the laws of the United States. The committee has now determined that the release of the memorandum would be appropriate. The executive branch, across administrations of both parties, has worked to accommodate a congressional request to declassify specific materials in the public interest. However, public release of classified information by unilateral action of the legislative branch is extremely rare and raises significant separation of powers concerns. Accordingly, the committee's request to release the memorandum is interpreted as a request for declassification pursuant to the President's authority. The President understands that the protection of our national security represents his highest obligation. Accordingly, he has directed lawyers and national security staff to assess the declassification request, consistent with established standards governing the handling of classified information, including those in Sections 3.1d of Executive Order 13526. Those standards permit declassification when the public interest in disclosure outweighs any need to protect the information. The White House review process also included input from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and the Department of Justice. Consistent with this review and these standards, the President has determined that declassification of the memorandum is appropriate. Based on this assessment and in light of the significant public interest in the memorandum, the President has authorized the declassification of the memorandum. To be clear, the memorandum reflects the judgments of its congressional authors. The President understands that oversight concerning matters related to the memorandum may be continuing, though the circumstances leading to the declassification through this process are extraordinary. The executive branch stands ready to work with Congress to accommodate oversight requests consistent with applicable standards and processes, including the need to protect intelligence sources and methods. Sincerely, Donald F. McGahn II, Counsel to the President. So that is the letter that was then attached to the congressional memo when it was returned to Congress for release, for possible release, and Congress then later did release it. So this was a memo that was authored by the staff of the Republican staff of the House Intelligence Committee, and they authored it based on classified information that was given to them or provided to them by the executive branch, meaning the CIA, the FBI, and I guess other intelligence agencies may have been included there as well. And so the House Intelligence Committee created a memo based on that information, and then that memo is the 4-page memo that Devin Nunes, the chairman of the committee, has said should be released to the public, so they're not releasing the actual classified information that the memo was based on. They're only releasing the memo itself. That is to say, kind of a summary, or anyway, it's a memo that was created from that classified information. And so the president is declassifying that congressional memo. And since it was I guess because it was Congress that, in the form of the staff of the Intelligence Committee, it was the House that created that memo. The president, for that reason, I guess, sent it back to Congress with his blessing, but without releasing it himself, so that the Congress could make the final decision on releasing it. And then here we have the memo itself, and at the top of the page it says unclassified, declassified by the order of the President, February 2, 2018. The memo itself is dated January 18, 2018, and it says to HPSCI majority members. HPSCI, I guess, stands for House Permanent Subcommittee on Intelligence. And so it is two HPSCI majority members from HPSCI majority staff. Subject is Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act abuses by the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So this is a 4-page memo that I'd like to start reading now. First, the subheading Purpose. The memorandum provides members an update on significant facts relating to the committee's ongoing investigation into the Department of Justice and Federal Bureau of Investigation and their use of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA, during the 2016 presidential election cycle. Our findings, which are detailed below, 1. Raise concerns with the legitimacy and legality of certain DOJ and FBI interactions with the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, and 2. Represent a troubling breakdown of legal processes established to protect the American people from abuses related to the FISA process. Subheading, another subheading, Investigation Update. On October 21, 2016, so October 21, 2016 would have been, let's see, about 2 weeks plus 2 weeks or so, maybe almost 3 weeks from the presidential election. I can't remember exactly what date the election was last year, but between 2 and 3 weeks from the presidential election. On October 21, 2016, DOJ and FBI sought and received a FISA probable cause order, not under Title VII, authorizing electronic surveillance on Carter Page from the FISC. That's the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. Page is a U.S. citizen who served as a volunteer advisor to the Trump presidential campaign. Consistent with the requirements under FISA, That's the the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. That's the act. The application had to be first certified by the director or deputy director of the FBI. It then required the approval of the Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, or the Senate-confirmed Assistant Attorney General for National Security Division. The FBI and DOJ obtained one initial FISA warrant targeting Carter Page and 3 FISA renewals from the FISC. As required by statute, a FISA order on an American citizen must be renewed by the FISA court every 90 days, and each renewal requires a separate finding of probable cause. Then Director James Comey signed 3 FISA applications in question on behalf of the FBI, and Deputy Director Andrew McCabe signed 1. Then DAG, that will be the Deputy Attorney General, then DAG Sally Yates, then Acting DAG Dana Puente, and DAG Rod Rosenstein each signed 1 or more FISA applications on behalf of DOJ. Due to the sensitive nature of foreign intelligence activity, FISA submissions, including renewals before the FISC, that's the FISA court, are classified. As such, the public's confidence in the integrity of the FISA process depends on the court's ability to hold the government to the highest standard, particularly as it relates to surveillance of American citizens. However, the FISA court's rigor in protecting the rights of Americans, which is reinforced by 90-day renewals of surveillance orders, is necessarily dependent on the government's production to the court of all material and relevant facts. This should include information potentially favorable to the target of the FISA application that is known by the government. In the case of Carter Page, the government had at least 4 independent opportunities before the FISA court to accurately provide an accounting of the relevant facts. However, our findings indicate that, as described below, material and relevant information was omitted. And then it breaks down that, the parentheses 1. The, quote, dossier, unquote, compiled by Christopher Steele, or in parentheses, Steele dossier, on behalf of the Democratic National Committee, DNC, and Hillary Clinton campaign, formed an essential part of the Carter Page FISA application. Steele was a longtime FBI source who was paid over $160,000 by the DNC and Clinton campaign via the law firm Perkins Cole and research firm Fusion GPS to obtain derogatory information on Donald Trump's ties to Russia. Then below that, then parentheses A, neither the initial application in October 2016 nor any of the renewals disclose or reference the role of the DNC, Clinton campaign, or any party/campaign in funding Steele's efforts, even though the political origins of the Steele dossier were then known to senior DOJ and FBI officials. Parentheses B, the initial FISA application notes Steele was working for a named U.S. person, but does not name Fusion GPS and Principal Glenn Simpson, who was paid by a U.S. law firm, Perkins Cole, representing the DNC, even though it was known by DOJ at the time that political actors were involved with the Steele dossier. The application does not mention Steele was ultimately working on behalf of and paid by the DNC and Clinton campaign, or that the FBI had separately authorized payment to Steele for the same information. So the FBI also paid Steele. The authorized payment to Steele. And then parentheses 2, the Carter Page FISA application also cited extensively a September 23, 2016 Yahoo News article by Michael Isikoff, which focuses on Page's July 2016 trip to Moscow. So here we have a court application that is an application to the court for a warrant that is quoting an online news article. I think that in itself is rather unusual. I don't think a news article would constitute proof of anything. I mean, if the news article quotes somebody or quotes some kind of document, then you should go back and get that person's testimony or get that document and make the application to the court on that basis. In my mind, a news article is not something that should be presented to a court as probable cause, a source of probable cause. Come on, I mean, reporters lie all the time. They're not under oath. This article does not corroborate the Steele dossier because it is derived from information leaked by Steele himself to Yahoo News. So Steele creates this dossier, and then in order to try and establish the credibility of the dossier, he talks to a reporter, and the reporter writes a story quoting unnamed sources, and then that's supposed to shore up the credibility of the dossier. I mean, this kind of thing goes on all the time. The page FISA, it's just, you know, I mean, I hope people realize that that's not a way to confirm anything. The page FISA application incorrectly assesses that Steele did not directly provide information to Yahoo News. So the page FISA application incorrectly assesses is another way of saying it lied. Incorrectly assesses that Steele did not directly provide information to Yahoo News. Steele has admitted in British court filings that he met with Yahoo News and several other outlets in September 2016 at the direction of Fusion GPS. Perkins Coie was aware of Steele's initial media contacts because they hosted at least one meeting in Washington, D.C. in 2016 with Steele and Fusion GPS where the matter was discussed. And then parentheses A, Steele was suspended and then terminated as an FBI source for what the FBI defines as the most serious of violations, and unauthorized its disclosure to the media of his relationship with the FBI in an October 30th, 2016 Mother Jones article by David Corn. Steele should have been terminated for his previous undisclosed contacts with Yahoo and other outlets in September, before the page application was submitted to the FISA court in October. But Steele improperly concealed from and lied to the FBI about those contacts. And then parentheses B, Steele's numerous encounters with the FBI, Steele's numerous encounters with the media violated the cardinal rule of source handling, maintaining confidentiality, and demonstrated that Steele had become a less than reliable source for the FBI. Then parentheses 3. Before and after Steele was terminated as a source, he maintained contact with DOJ via then Associate Deputy Attorney General Bruce Orr, a senior DOJ official who worked closely with Deputy Attorneys General Yates and later Rosenstein. Shortly after the election, the FBI began interviewing Orr, documenting his communications with Steele. For example, in September 2016, Steele admitted to Orr his feelings against then-candidate Trump when Steele said he, quote, was desperate that Donald Trump not get elected and was passionate about him not being president, unquote. And that quotation is in bold type. This clear evidence of Steele's bias was recorded by Orr at the time and subsequently in official FBI files, but not reflected in any of the page FISA applications. Parentheses A, during the same period, Orr's wife was employed by Fusion GPS to assist in the cultivation of opposition research on Trump. Orr later provided the FBI with all of his wife's opposition research, paid for by the DNC and Clinton campaign via Fusion GPS. The Orr's relationship with Steele and Fusion GPS was inexplicably concealed from the FISA court. 4, parentheses 4. According to the head of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, Assistant Director Bill Priestap, corroboration of the Steele dossier was in its infancy at the time of the initial page FISA application. After Steele was terminated, a source validation report conducted by an independent unit within FBI assessed Steele's reporting as only minimally corroborated. Yet in early 2017, Director Comey briefed President-elect Trump on a summary of the Steele dossier, even though it was, according to his June 2017 testimony, salacious and unverified. While the FISA application relied on Steele's past record of credible reporting on other related matters, it ignored or concealed his anti-Trump financial and ideological motivations. Furthermore, Deputy Director McCabe testified before the committee in December 2017 that no surveillance warrant would have been sought from the FISA court without the Steele dossier information. And then parentheses 5, the page FISA application also mentions information regarding fellow Trump campaign advisor George Papadopoulos, but there's no evidence of any cooperation or conspiracy between Page and Papadopoulos. The Papadopoulos information triggered the opening of an FBI counterintelligence investigation in late July 2016 by FBI agent Pete Strzok. Strzok was reassigned by the Special Counsel's office to FBI Human Resources for improper text messages with his mistress, FBI attorney Lisa Page, no known relation to Carter Page, where they both demonstrated a clear bias against Trump and in favor of Clinton, whom Strzok had also investigated. The Strzok-Lisa Page texts also reflect extensive discussions about the investigation, orchestrating leaks to the media, and including a meeting with Deputy Director McCabe to discuss a, quote, insurance policy, unquote, against President Trump's election. Is that it? 5 of 6. Am I missing a page? No, I guess that's it. Okay. All right. That's it. All right. Is that it? I guess that's it. Yes. That was a 6. All right. Yeah, that was page 6. All right. So that's it. So that is the memo. We have now read it. We have now read it after all this time that we've been wondering what was in it. Let's see let's look at the worldtribune.com story on this. President Donald Trump, in an early morning tweet on February 2nd, lashed out at a politicized FBI after the fabled agency publicly advised against releasing a classified memo said to question how it conducted its investigation to the Trump campaign's alleged ties to Russia. I think right now, since the memo has been released, we have to stop and wonder why the desperate effort by the FBI, the Department of Justice, and the Democrats on the Intelligence Committee and Nancy Pelosi and others, why the desperate effort to prevent this from coming out? I think it is good that it came out, and I think it certainly serves the public interest, and I certainly don't see how it compromises sources and methods. But even if it does, to some extent, there's a lot that's being revealed here that the public definitely needs to know. You know, in the past, something like this might have been leaked to the New York Times or the Washington Post, for example. You know, remember the Pentagon Papers? Maybe, well, at least some of us remember the Pentagon Papers. Was published by the news media back then, and played a large role in informing the public on what was going on with respect to the Vietnam War, and the public was able to make certain judgments based on those, whether right or wrong. And here too, I think this is an important public service that has been done by the House Intelligence Committee in drafting this memo and releasing it. Trump tweeted, "The top leadership and investigators of the FBI and Justice Department have politicized the sacred investigative process in favor of Democrats and against Republicans, something which would have been unthinkable just a short time ago. Rank and file people are great." The memo written by Republican members of the House Intelligence Committee was released on February 2nd. In an earlier statement, the FBI said it has grave concerns about the material omissions of fact that fundamentally impact the memo's accuracy. Democrats on the committee said the memo omits important context. And Reuters reported that the memo contends the FBI and Justice Department failed to tell a U.S. judge that some of the information used to justify the extension of a warrant for surveillance of Carter Page included portions of the discredited Trump dossier by ex-British spy Christopher Steele. In another early morning tweet on February 2, the president tweeted out the following tweet from Judicial Watch President Tim Fitton. You had Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party try to hide the fact that they gave money to GPS Fusion to create the dossier, which was used by their allies in the Obama administration to convince a court misleadingly, by all accounts, to spy on the Trump team. Tim Fitton, JW. All right, let's take a break, and then we'll come back with more discussion of this memo and other news after this.
Little hands, shoeless feet, lonely eyes looking back at me. Will we leave behind the innocent to grieve? On their own, on the run, when their lives have only begun. These could be our daughters and our sons. Just like a drum, I can hear their hearts beating. I know my God won't let them be defeated. Every child has a dream to belong and be loved. Boys become kings, girls will be queens, wrapped in your majesty. When we love the least of these, then they will be brave and free. Shout your name in victory. When we love the least of these. When we love the least of these. Break our hearts once again. Help us to remember when we were only children hoping for a friend. Won't you look around? These are the lives that the world has forgotten, waiting for doors of our hearts and our homes to open. Boys become kings, girls will be queens, wrapped in your majesty. When we love the least of these.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, February 3rd, 2018. I'm Tim Elder, joined now by Regis and Nancy Hanna, second king of Cheongguk, Hyung Moon. And Regis and Nancy have been living in Panama until recently, until the end of last year, and they've now moved to the northeast Pennsylvania area to work here with the king directly. And they are members of the 1800 couple Blessing, and they originally went to Panama in 1975. Is that right? As missionaries, yes. Sent out. They were among the group of missionaries. They were sent out by Father to countries around the world. I don't remember how many countries went out at that time. Was it 100 or?
I think it was 120.
120 countries received missionaries at that time, and they were sent out then to Panama. I want to get into your experience, but before that, let's talk more about this this meteor that has struck the Earth.
These are exciting times.
this memo, because so much, both sides really played up the memo. The Democrats, in trying to play it down, actually had an effect of playing it up, because the more they talked about it, the more curious we were. Hollywood could not have done a better job of promoting something before its release, of teasing something and getting people excited about it before its release. And now that it's released, James Comey, the former FBI director who was fired by President Trump, gives his reaction, "That's it?" To which my reaction is, well, Mr. Comey, if there's more, please tell. if you're expecting something else, please tell us what it is. But anyway, he. According to this article, torched the Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee over the release of the memo. And his tweet is, "That's it." Everybody's communicating by Twitter these days.
Right.
Dishonest and misleading memo wrecked the House Intelligence Committee, destroyed trust with the intelligence community, damaged the relationship with FISA court, and inexcusably exposed classified investigation of an American citizen. For what? DOJ and FBI must keep doing their jobs. The FBI made a rare public statement expressing concerns about the release of the memo, saying that it leaves out important context. And Comey praised the FBI for speaking up on Thursday. Democrats slammed the release of the memo. The Democratic members of the House Judiciary Committee said House Republicans were complicit in efforts to obstruct justice by releasing the memo. So there's a lot of emotion on both sides right now about this memo, but I'm interested in hearing your reaction.
Well, I think what's fascinating is that we now know there absolutely was collaboration between one candidate
Yes.
and the Russians. Except that candidate was Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
It was not Donald Trump.
That seems clear, yes, that there was, and that's not just something that's being reported in the media. It's actually comes from a much more credible source. People with direct access to this CIA and FBI classified information. It would have been interesting if President Trump had actually taken a further step and declassified that. The information that went into creating this memo.
Well, I think that's going to happen.
You think it's going to happen?
Because, for example, I heard a number of people on TV last night saying that people are very interested to see the exact quotes from McCabe saying that indeed there would not have been a FISA warrant issued if not for the Steele dossier. That's a very damning comment.
Yeah. One thing certainly people are going to take away from this is that there's a lot of stuff going on in the background that we're not being told about.
Yeah.
And until now we've assumed that people were taking care of us and we didn't have to worry about these kinds of things, or at least a lot of people have. But this sort of gives you the impression that maybe we better start taking a closer look at what exactly is going on behind the curtain.
Well, it was very disturbing, the fact that our civil rights are being so blatantly violated. Some people believe the FISA court, when it reviews these applications, actually there's some kind of deliberation, but other reports say that basically the FISA court judge will issue a warrant based on whatever evidence is presented to them. So it's very disturbing.
Yeah, and I wanted to do a little bit of background on the FISA itself, because this has sort of come into the public, common discourse relatively recently, but actually goes back to 1978. The FISA, the Act, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, was actually passed in 1978. It establishes a procedure for the physical and electronic surveillance and collection of foreign intelligence information between foreign powers and agents of foreign powers suspected of espionage or terrorism. The Act created the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court to oversee requests for surveillance warrants by federal law enforcement and intelligence agencies. It has been repeatedly amended since the September 11 attacks in 2001. It was first introduced on May 18, 1977 by Senator Ted Kennedy. So
Interesting.
This is a Democratic thing to begin with, and was signed into law by President Carter in 1978. The bill was co-sponsored by 9 senators: Birch Bayh, James O. Eastland, Jake Garn, etc., etc. Daniel Inouye is also, I think most of these, Strom Thurmond is a Republican, but Daniel Inouye is a Democrat. I know Gaylord Nelson, I forget. But anyway, the FISA resulted from extensive investigations by Senate committees into the legality of domestic intelligence activities. These investigations were led separately by Sam Ervin and Frank Church in 1978 as a response to President Richard Nixon's usage of federal resources to spy on political and activist groups. So this FISA Act and the FISA Court were set up in response to Watergate, basically. To prevent the president from, or prevent a president, or prevent one political party from spying on another. And yet we find here that it was used exactly for that purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
The act was created to provide judicial and congressional oversight of the government's covert surveillance activities of foreign entities and individuals in the United States, while maintaining the secrecy needed to protect national security. This, the national security, it can easily be used as a cover for corrupt activity within the government.
Easily.
Warrantless domestic wiretapping program. The act came into public prominence in December 2005, following publication by the New York Times of an article that described a program of warrantless domestic wiretapping ordered by the Bush administration and carried out by the National Security Agency since 2002. A subsequent Bloomberg article suggested that this may have already begun in June 2000. Generally, the statute permits electronic surveillance in 2 different scenarios. The President may authorize, through the Attorney General, electronic surveillance without a court order for the period of 1 year, provided that it is only to acquire foreign intelligence information, that it is solely directed at communications or property controlled exclusively by foreign powers. I'm reading, by the way, from the Wikipedia article, that there is no substantial likelihood that it will acquire the contents of any communication to which a United States person is a party, and that it be conducted only in accordance with the defined minimization procedures. So that is one of the 2 scenarios without a court order. But in this case, we're with Carter Page, we're talking about with a court order, so let's look at that. Alternatively, the government may seek a court order permitting the surveillance using the FISA court. Approval of a FISA application requires the court to find probable cause that the target of the surveillance be a, quote, foreign power, unquote, or an, quote, agent of a foreign power, unquote, and that the places at which surveillance is requested is used or will be used by the foreign power or its agent. In addition, the court must find that the proposed surveillance meets certain minimization requirements for information pertaining to U.S. persons, depending on the type of surveillance approved. Orders of extensions of orders may be active for 90 days, 120 days, or a year. And then there's a section on the FISA court itself. The act created the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, FISC, and enabled it to oversee requests for surveillance warrants by federal law enforcement and intelligence agencies, primarily the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the National Security Agency, against suspected foreign intelligence agents inside the U.S. The court is located within the courthouse, the United States Courthouse in Washington, D.C. The court is staffed by 11 judges, appointed by the Chief Justice of the United States to serve 7-year terms. That's interesting. 11 judges appointed by the Chief Justice. Proceedings before the FISA court are ex parte and non-adversarial. That means that the defendant is not there.
That's correct. He's not represented either.
Yes.
Nobody's saying why they should not grant
Right.
the warrant.
Non-adversarial sounds good, but it means that if the government is coming after you, you don't even get to know that.
That's exactly right.
The court hears evidence presented solely by the Department of Justice. There is no provision for a release of information regarding such hearings or for the record of information actually collected. Denials of FISA applications by the FISA court may be appealed to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court of Review. So there's another court. The Court of Review is a 3-judge panel. Since its creation, the court has come into session twice, in 2002 and 2008. So it's not used very much. I guess that's maybe because applications are rarely denied, it would seem. If they were often denied, you would think that the Court of Review would have been used more often. The FISA court meets in secret and approves or denies requests for search warrants. Only the number of warrants applied for, issued, and denied is reported. In 1980, the first full year after its inception, it approved 322 warrants. This number has steadily grown to 2,224 warrants in 2006. In the period 1979 to 2006, a total of 22,990 applications for warrants were made to the court, of which 22,985 were approved. So, a little bit of arithmetic here. 5 were denied.
Surprise, surprise. Looks like the court gets what it wants.
Wow. Out of 22,990 applications, 5 were denied. Wow. I'd like to see those 5. I mean, how bad were they? Maybe, how bad do you have to be in order to get denied? Wow. A total of 22,990 applications for warrants were made to the court. That's between 1979 and 2006. So that's, what is that? That's 27 years. 22,990 applications for warrants were made to the court, of which 22,985 were approved. Oh, my goodness. And the media is not interested in this.
Totally.
In addition to electronic surveillance, FISA permits the physical search of the premises, information, material, or property used exclusively by a foreign power. The requirements and procedures are nearly identical to those for electronic surveillance. Remedies for violations. Both the subchapters covering physical searches and electronic surveillance provide for criminal and civil liability for violations of FISA. Criminal sanctions follows violations of electronic surveillance by intentionally engaging in electronic surveillance under the color of law or through disclosing information known to have been obtained through unauthorized surveillance. The penalties for either act are fines up to $10,000. But what about the remedies for abuse of the system? Let's see. Constitutionality. There have been very few cases involving the constitutionality of FISA. 2 lower court decisions found FISA constitutional. In the United States versus Duggan, the defendants were members of the Irish Republican Army. They were convicted for various violations regarding the shipment of explosives and firearms. The court held that there were compelling considerations of national security and the distinction between the treatment of U.S. citizens and non-resident aliens. In the United States versus Nicholson, the defendant moved to suppress all evidence gathered under a FISA order. The court affirmed the denial of the motion. The court flatly rejected claims that FISA violated due process clause of the Fifth Amendment, equal protection, separation of powers, or the right to counsel provided by the Sixth Amendment. However, in a third case, the Special Review Court of FISA, the equivalent of a Circuit Court of Appeals, opined differently. Should FISA limit the president's inherent authority for warrantless searches in the foreign intelligence area? The special court stated all the other courts to have decided the issue have held that the president did have inherent authority to conduct warrantless searches to obtain foreign intelligence information. We take for granted that the president does have that authority, and assuming that is so, FISA could not encroach on the president's constitutional powers. And let's see, in January 2018, the man's surveillance provisions were extended for 6 additional years. So this is amendments, Protect America Act of 2007, Protect America Act. So I think one USA Freedom Act of 2015, the 2015 law overhauled the powerful United States National Security Agency and required the U.S. government to undergo standard of court procedures in order to gather data suspicious. However, the law did not completely repeal the controversial Patriot Act and allowed some provisions to expire in later time. Okay, so anyway, this memo release is certainly going to put more focus on the FISA Act, both the law and the court, and see what's going on there. You have a court that is approving. What kind of percentage is that? 5 out of 22,990. I don't even want to.
Must be higher than 99%.
Much higher. Yes. Let's calculate that. 5 divided by 2,200. 22,000. I'm sorry. 22,990 is 0.0002. So that's 0.02% were rejected. That means that 99.98% were approved. So, what kind of a court is that? If you're just what are they? What kind of is the FBI that perfect? Is the FBI 99.98% perfect? What is the use of a court that approves 98.98% of the warrant applications that are submitted to it? Someone, an enterprising reporter, I think, would want to compare that to warrant applications to other courts, to district courts, in the regular world. How many judges are there that will approve 99.98% of the warrant applications that are submitted to them? I'd like to know that. That would be interesting. And what is the average of approval of applications by judges? Is there another court in America that will approve 98.98%? Basically, it's just a tool of the FBI. It's just giving a fig leaf, I would say, to the FBI and letting it do whatever it wants. And I think this memo, and maybe that's one reason that some people were so angry about this whole thing being released, that it was going to expose the FISA court for the sham that it is. Come on, 11 judges appointed by the Chief Justice of the Supreme. Who's the Chief Justice appointing anyway? Let's see who's on that court. I bet they won't tell us.
No, it's secret. They're secret.
Who are the FISA court judges? Yeah. Excuse me. Oh, wait. Here we go. current membership, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Corps. We do have their names. I'm sorry. We do have their names. Okay, we do have their names. Rosemary M. Collier, presiding. James E. Boasberg, Rudolph Contreras, Ann C. Conway, Raymond J. Deary, Claire V. Egan, James P. Jones, Robert B. Kugler, Michael W. Mossman, Thomas B. Russell, F. Dennis Saylor IV. And see, their terms are expiring. There's one guy here. The guy F. Dennis Saylor IV. his term is expiring in May this year. I see. These people are all judges in district courts around the country: Massachusetts, Kentucky, Oregon, New Jersey, Virginia. So they have a day job. They have a day job, and then as a night job, they just sort of auto sign these warrants from warrant applications from the FBI, 99.98% of the time. This is crazy. This is crazy. Oh my goodness. But they do have day jobs. But maybe we should start getting some people that are going to, look more closely at these applications instead of just auto signing them.
Well, it's interesting also that Carter Page, I looked a little bit last night into his background. Some people had described him in a pejorative way. But this is a 46-year-old man who's unmarried, who's got he's an investment banker. He's a one-man outfit with a office within somebody else's office in Russia. And his business is to make good relations with various oligarchs and important people in Russia to be able to make a few nickels on the side. So he spouts pro-Putin propaganda, and because he appeared to be friendly with the Kremlin and Kremlin officials, then they thought, well, maybe he's a spy. But, if you're going to do business with the Kremlin, you can't very well be poking their eye and criticizing them.
Well, remember that what was it in the 1980s when Dr. Bohi Pak and others were hauled before the who was the Minnesota representative who Donald Fraser.
Donald Fraser, that's right.
And basically, they were investigating South Korea, KCIA for bribery, and I think people described it accurately at that time that this was basically a case of a U.S. ally is trying to shore up its relationship with the United States, and Donald Fraser was making a big thing out of it. As if this was a big threat to the national security of the United States. United States and Russia need to be, working together, especially since Russia and the United States are, at least under President Trump, are aware of the dangers of a top-down centralized organization such as the European Union. Need to be working together. So, someone like Carter Page to be doing that, to be friendly with the Russian oligarchs. Was he friendly with the oligarchs or with the government itself?
Both.
Both. Okay. Well, even if friendly with the government, and I don't see that is something that warrants an investigation by the FBI with a warrant from the FISA court as if they were investigating some foreign intelligence activity. I don't think that's the kind of thing that the FISA court was established for.
Well, the really attractive thing about Carter Page, of course, was that he was a volunteer in the Trump organization, their campaign organization. And so this basically allowed the FBI to surveil various people inside the Trump campaign organization and then unmask them at the request of whoever in the Democratic Party wanted them unmasked and reveal all of the strategy to the Democratic side. It is very, very concerning.
All right, we're going to take a break now because we're at the top of the hour, and I'd like to talk more about this, but I don't know. Maybe there's other things going on in the world as well. We'll think about that a little bit during the break. Let's take a break for about 5 minutes now.
Like Jesus, to the least of these. If not us, tell me who will be. Like Jesus, to the least of these. Boys become kings, girls will be queens, wrapped in your majesty. When we love. restless feet, lonely eyes looking back at me. Will we leave behind the innocent to grieve? On their own, on the run, when their lives have only begun. These could be our daughters and our sons. And just like a drum, I can hear their hearts beating. I know my God won't let them be defeated. Every child has a dream to belong and be loved. Boys become kings, girls will be queens, wrapped in your majesty. When we love the least of these, then they will be brave and free. Shout your name in victory. When we love the least of these, when we love the least of these. Break our hearts once again.
At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name.
Welcome back to the King's Report for February 3rd, Saturday, 2018, and a rather cool Saturday morning here. It's a wintry Saturday morning, and this is the 8th year of Cheongi, the 12th month, and the 18th day. We're coming up on God's Day pretty soon. Cheongi 8 is about to pass into history. I want to do my rimas now. First in the Bible, in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 20, and verse 47. And say to the forest of the south, hear the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will kindle a fire in thee, and it shall devour every green tree in thee, and every dry tree, and the flaming flame shall not be quenched, and all faces from the south to the north shall be burned therein. So I did a little bit of, you get a rima like this, and you think, okay, what is God trying to tell me here? The forest of the south, apparently, according to the commentary, refers to the kingdom of Judah. It's the southern kingdom. And according to the commentary that I read, the forest is in contrast to an orchard, because trees that are in the forest you don't have apples trees and orange trees and so forth in the forest.
Right.
You have them outside the forest in an orchard. And so this commentary said there's a contrast here, whereas trees in the forest don't bear fruit. Is that really true? I mean, forests still provide plenty of food, don't they, as our king has showed us many times. But anyway, that's one commentator's opinion. So, this shows God's displeasure with the kingdom of Judah. Of course, the kingdom of Judah is the two tribes that did not betray God and eventually gave birth to Jesus Christ and carried on God's providence. But God was not necessarily always happy with Judah, and sometimes they needed a little spanking to get them back on track. So in today's, there were 2 tribes in Judah and 10 tribes in Israel, the kingdom to the north, and we don't know what actually happened to those 10 tribes. They became so secularized, shall we say, or so commingled with the culture around them, with the pagan culture, that they kind of disappeared into the woodwork, and only the 2 tribes in the south remained. So we're kind of like the kingdom of Judah, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Yes. So as we approach the blessing, maybe God is not so happy with us either, that our standard maybe needs a little bracing. maybe this is what this Rima is telling us. That's what what do you feel, Regis?
Well, fire is of course an image for the Word, and the Word purifies. We don't always like the Word, especially the Word that accuses us and clarifies the points where we're failing, where we're not enough. Repentance is so important as a foundation for our faith.
Yes. Yes, repentance, daily repentance,
Yes.
constant repentance is so important, yes. Thank you very much. Thank you for reminding us of that. Yes, and I will kindle, and it shall devour every green tree in thee and every dry tree. So I guess a dry tree would be a tree that is, I can see that would symbolize people who have sort of lost their faith. Maybe I think people have sort of dried up. Green tree would be even people who are alive or have faith.
Yeah.
And so this fire, though, will devour even the green trees, and of course the dry trees. The flaming flame shall not be quenched, and all faces from the south to the north shall be burned therein. Our faces are going to be burned. I understand the Queen got quite a bit of a sunburn this time during.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll have to see when she gets back. But that's what I think that's what the King mentioned when he appeared on the King's Report briefly a few days ago from the desert of Arizona, there near the Grand Canyon. So as we approach, I think this very much speaks to us as we approach the 9th year of Chungi, and as we approach the blessing that's going to occur the 13th day of that 9th year of Chungi. I think we need to keep in mind that it's not just the family federation that God is displeased with, because God can also be displeased with his chosen remnant as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. And all flesh shall see that I, the Lord, have kindled it, and it shall not be quenched. Well, the word shall not be quenched, yes. And then said I, O Lord God, they say of me, doth he not speak in parables? All right, well, so I guess there Ezekiel is saying, well, God, they don't take me seriously. They just say, well, God's just speaking in parables again. There's not going to be a real fire. Let's hope not. Let's hope that God speaks in parables here, and that we don't burn our church down or something like that. So let's be careful with fire over the next few days.
We've seen a lot of fires in California.
Yes. The Cheonsongyong Rima comes not about California, but about Hawaii. Like that transition there. This is in the Pacific Rim Providence book on the Pacific Rim Providence, the very end of chapter 3. And in the English, I'm on 1936. Hawaii in Korean sounds like the phrase, come back after you've done it. Hewara. Okay. It is also similar to the Korean word for Eve, hewa, which means come back after doing your job. In other words, it sounds like that. If you pronounce this slowly, it sounds like Hawaii, which has become a domain where there is exchange between Western civilization and Asian civilization. I had thought that Hawaii was part of the United States, but now it is becoming Japanese land. Reverend Moon is currently educating the people there to make them one. Who will educate them? A whirlwind must begin. Centering on the land of Hawaii, I am now working on creating a global sphere of influence. Yes, Father was very interested in Hawaii because it lies in the center of the Pacific. And he, of course, placed great importance on the Pacific and the Pacific Rim, and both in terms of the resources of the Pacific Ocean itself and also the countries around the Pacific, and the movement of civilization from Egypt to Greece, and then to Rome, Europe, and to the British Isles, and then to the United States, and then to the Pacific Rim. It was one flow of civilization that he often pointed out. And so he invested a great deal in Hawaii, visited there often, created the Ocean Providence there. The Ocean Providence, Hawaii, connected that to Yosu, in Korea. At some point, that I'm sure will be revived in one way or another. Yes.
Well, the Pacific Rim has certainly been the area with a lot of activity. What's going on in North Korea, the central focus of the world is in that area at this time. But what role Hawaii can play in that province still remains to be seen.
There's a lot of work that needs to be done to rebuild the foundation that True Father created during his time on Earth. Of course, almost all of that was taken by the Han Mother and has been corrupted. And basically, the king the second king basically is beginning here again from scratch. It began here from scratch in 2013 and has built up now a foundation that extends to, I don't think we have an accurate count right now, but anyway, more than 60 countries around the world. And brothers and sisters, of course, even now are waking up and returning to True Father's authority. We receive messages frequently from people who are doing that, and reports from our continental directors about people who are finally understanding the truth and are coming. So more and more the blessed couples that were created by Father are returning to him, as well as the new couples coming as well. So that the Father's foundation can be recreated, and Hawaii is part of that.
And I think we have to remember that where Father started from when he started in a mud hut in Palm Nicole.
Yes.
The difference between where the king is starting from right now is just light years.
Yes.
So after 5 years, when Father was beginning in his mud hut, where was he? And look at where the king is after 5 years.
Yes.
So the difference is it cannot be calculated. So 50 years from now, 30 years from now, even 20 years from now, where the king will be, should be quite surprising.
His father built that hut on the mountainside above Busan in 1951, in early 1951. 5 years after that, in 56, by that time he had already been in jail once.
Yes.
Because of the Ihwa incident in 1955. He had founded the HSAUWC in 1954 during that 5-year period, I guess. And so, but already he had been in jail. In 1955, he was in jail from July 4th until October 4th, charged with draft evasion. But the media played it up as a sexual thing and that was because as I understand, so many people were coming to the church, especially from Ihwa University, which was a women's university supported by Methodists in Canada. Anyway, I think U.S. and Canada. And the university was very concerned that if they were to lose their significant number of their student body to this cult, that this would jeopardize their funding. The interesting thing is that they didn't mind children of Buddhist parents. They didn't mind Buddhist women studying at there or Confucian women studying there.
Right.
But they did mind members of what they considered a cult of Reverend Moon studying there. And the head of Ihwa University was very close to the powers that be in the South Korean government at the time, including the Speaker of the National Assembly and the Vice President, I believe. And so in the beginning, the media in South Korea was on the side of the women. It's because the church was, the school was putting pressure on them, either leave the church or leave the school.
Well, not only that, they sent Hyung Kim,
Yes.
who was an up-and-coming luminary who
Yes.
was expected to be a future
She
president.
had studied theology in Canada, I think. Yeah.
and
in Toronto.
And then she was sent.
She was sent there to debunk this
right.
this
and she
theology,
ended up joining.
and she ended up joining.
That must have been a real sharp stick in the eye.
Yes, and so the school was even more, in crisis mode at that time, really in DEFCON 4 mode at that time, and they finally, in the beginning, as I said, the media was actually critical of the school and sided with the women who were going to this thing, religious liberty and all this, the South Korean media. But then one day it completely changed, it would just completely change on a dime, and they started describing this as a sex cult and everything like that, and Father and a few other leaders at that time were arrested on draft dodging charges, and I had an opportunity one time to read the verdict of the court on that case. And there was Father was just mentioned in one short line.
Buried in page 16 of the newspaper.
Well, in the verdict itself, it was a long verdict, but regarding Father, there was just one short line.
Is that right?
It said, and I remember I can quote it for you word for word. Moon Young-myung is not guilty. That's all it said. Father was going by the name Moon Young-myung at that time. I've forgotten who the other leaders were that were arrested at that time. I think forgotten who it was. But anyway, he was. But I don't think so, because he was crippled. I'm not sure that he was.
Right.
Yeah,
he had a club foot.
Right. I'm not sure he was, but it went very long into this. But the reason that Father was charged with draft dodging, though, was because he had not joined the South Korean military during the Korean War, which he had a good excuse for. He was in prison.
Exactly.
in a North Korean death camp, excuse me.
Right.
And he barely escaped with his life after the prison was bombed, and then walked down to South Korea, where he was promptly arrested for not being in the army. But that was the fog of war, the kind of thing that was going on at that time. But I don't know how I got onto that subject from Hawaii. But actually, I was intending, Regis and Nancy, to ask you guys about your experience in Panama, because
Right.
I think that is a very exciting thing that everyone would like to hear about.
Right. Well, my wife was originally had a very unusual reason why she got assigned to Panama. Do you want to talk about that? How you were chosen as a missionary?
I was chosen as a missionary.
Well, Father picked personally. Father assigned all of the missionaries for Latin America, but in the case of Panama, he asked Neil Salone a special question.
Who's the one person that will never leave no matter what?
Mm.
And Mr. Salone gave my name.
Mm.
So that's how I became a missionary to Panama.
Wow. That's the importance that Father attached to Panama.
That's right.
It's the linchpin there.
Right.
Well, there were 5 countries where Father made holy grounds, and there was Panama, and he made the holy ground on the 4th of July, on the avenue, 4th of July. There was a 4th of July avenue there.
It was the avenue where there was the Panama Canal Zone that was dumb. At that time, all the Americans were there, so it was like the exact place where there was Panama and the
In the U.S.
Americans, right?
All right. Because Panama Canal Zone at that time was U.S. territory.
That's right. Exactly.
And then Colombia, because Colombia helped in the Korean War, sent a delegation, and the ABC countries, Argentina, Brazil, and Chile, in the Southern Cone. So it was very special. And then when we volunteered for the National Messiah Mission, there was a lottery in Korea, and I was the one who participated in the lottery, and surprise, surprise, we got our Nancy's original mission country.
Incredible.
Once
Panama.
again,
Reverend Quag called it the miracle of
a Chungkyung miracle.
Chungkyung miracle.
It's like a miracle.
Yeah. So we had a very interesting experience there because during the world tour of the Three Generations, Shinmi father's granddaughter, was the only one who arrived. And originally there was a delegation coming from Peru, but they couldn't get plane tickets to come from Peru, so nobody was going to come. In her case, she'd missed a plane in Brazil, and then she got another flight to go to Peru, and a bridge fell down and prevented her from catching that plane. So she came to Panama and ended up being the only representative of the True family. I was so proud of our members at that time because we had been expecting this large delegation, and only one person arrived, Shin Minim, and nobody was negative, nobody complained, nobody was disheartened. Everybody just pulled together. It was really beautiful.
She was
to
a
see that
wonderful,
attitude.
absolutely wonderful person.
She was amazing. She did a
Incredible.
great job. And unbeknownst to us at that time, there was a martial arts group that were also evangelical Christians, started in 1973. 8-year-old Maestro Fabio Perez at that time, he was 8 years old. He had severe asthma. And he saw that his friends didn't have anybody to guide them morally and ethically. And he was really concerned. His parents gave him moral and ethical training, and his friends didn't have that. So he noticed that young people loved martial arts. He was just 8 years old. Just 8 years old. Couldn't even practice very well because he had asthma. And he just felt moved. He said, I have to do something. I'm gonna practice martial arts and teach people moral values. So he had started this movement, and he kept getting accused of being a Moonie. Didn't even know what a Moonie was. And he sent spies to the Moonies, and people came back and they said, well, they're just like us. So he personally attended the Shinminim event, the Shinminim speech, and he had a spiritual experience. And he afterwards testified at the banquet, VIP banquet we had. He said, I feel like this event was like a sweet perfume rising up to heaven.
Can you remind us, when was that, the tour?
That was November 2006.
2006, so about 11 years ago plus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Master Fabio is only 19 years old now?
No,
I see.
he's now 50.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so it started when he was 8.
When he was 8 years
okay.
old, yeah.
All right.
So after that, I noticed something unique about him at the event because he was vice mayor of a very large suburb of Panama. And, most politicians are prima donnas and push themselves to the front. He didn't push himself to the front at all. And he ended up not even getting a picture taken with Shiminim because he didn't push himself to the front. I thought, this man is not, there's something unusual about this man. So we began working with him, and his top leadership, 50 couples, heard, more than that, heard all divine principle, but the top 50 couples all received a blessing and did 3-day ceremony and accepted True Father and have accepted the King and participate in the returning ceremony to Father's authority. So we're very proud of them. They really practice a Christian life. It's very sacrificial.
Very sacrificial.
An example, this is one couple at one time, we didn't know that we knew them through a different route, and we found out afterwards that they had been part of Fabio's organization. And we said, well, what happened? Why did you leave? And the woman said, well, basically, we realized, we wanted to get married, and as members of Hisauli, we gave all our money.
Now, what is
Hisauli?
Hisauli?
Hisauli is Fabio's organization. He has invented his own style of martial arts.
I see, because Hisauli sounds like someone's name.
It means, in Cantonese, I believe it means beautiful woman.
I see. 'Cause I thought there were two people, Master Fabio and Hisao Lee. I thought there were
No.
two people here, but I see Hisao
Yeah.
Lee is the name of the organization.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So she said if we wanted to get married, we had to stop participating in Hisao Lee because otherwise we would have no money to set up our household. They buy, their students are frequently poor people. They charge $5 a month for martial arts, which is nothing. And if the students can't pay, they give them lessons for free. And if their students don't have shoes for school, they buy them shoes. If they don't have a school uniform, the instructors is told, you have to provide for them. You have to get the money for their books. They take them out to the movies sometimes. They take them out for a coke. They're like a really big brother to them. It's a wonderful program of mentoring, and particularly they practice abstinence. And this was what was very really caught our attention and caught their attention because they found that we practice abstinence and preach that, and they had never heard of any other group that did that. And of course, we were fascinated that they were teaching abstinence and had a very high success rate with it. So for the last 10 years of our 21 years in Panama, for the last 11 years, we've been working very closely with Maestro Fabio and his people.
How large is that organization now?
They have 3,500 students at any one time, but there's a flow because students join and then they may leave, they may get active for a month or two, and then they drift away. But he calculates about 100,000 people have gone through his program over the last 45 years or so.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And do you have an idea of how many blessed couples have come out of that relationship?
It's over 50.
At least 50. Yeah.
How many blessed children?
There's more than 15.
More than 15 blessed children.
Yes.
Yeah. That's wonderful.
And I should mention that at the same time as we began working with Maestro Fabio, we were extremely privileged to have assigned to us a very wonderful Korean bongbongwan, Lee Byung-moon, who's in UK. He's quite sick now. Perhaps they'll see this broadcast and we can say, hi, Dr. Lee, we hope you're feeling better.
We love you.
We love you so much, and we're so grateful to you.
So
and
grateful.
He really taught us how to work with Hisao Lee.
We had really kind of no idea what to do.
He would come and he would spend 3 months in Panama. He didn't speak Spanish. Very sacrificial. Wasn't so much for him to do, but he would meet every week with Maestro Fabio, and we watched him, and he taught us, you should do this, you should do that. This is the best way to proceed. He was amazing.
Can you give us some examples of what he taught you?
He would listen a great deal to Maestro Fabio. He wouldn't say much. And Maestro Fabio, because he is a very dominant person, and he's really a minister. He's really a minister, and he was quite pleased that we recognized him as a minister. So Dr. Lee encouraged us to participate often and actively in his church. We went many times to their evangelical church.
I think we went every week to their church service. Yeah.
And we went every Sunday. Based on his encouragement, I would go every Sunday. They have a meeting in a gymnasium in San Miguelito in this very large suburb. And I would circulate and talk with the people, talk with their couples, and counsel them and pastor them. This was all based on Dr. Lee's guidance, what we should do. He said, just treat them as if they are members, but we never asked them to join our church. And when they were blessed, they would say on the application, it says, what church do you belong to? I'd say, we'll put down. They would say, what do we put? I would say, we'll put down your church, Ministerio Glorificate. That's what church you belong to. So they were quite moved that we, in fact, we would even brag about it to people. We'd say, do you know how many members of Hisao Lee have joined our church over the course of 10 years? And I would say, this number. Zero, because I said, that's not what we're about. You know, what we're about is serving and ministering and helping strengthen their families.
Well, it's wonderful and very providential, I think, that you come here at this time, because also the Second King is reaching out to evangelical Christians.
Right.
And I think some of the things that Dr. Lee taught you perhaps can be taught to us here, can be passed on to the people here who are working with Christian churches. I'm sure some of them are watching right now. I'm sure they'd be very interested in meeting with you and learning more about what you learned from Dr. Lee and what you can pass on of what you learned and your success story.
Well, we brought Maestro Fabio here, and he met with the king. And what was so amazing was that when he came into the service that morning, the hymns that were sung were exactly the hymns that we sing in his church in Panama.
In Spanish,
So
though.
in Spanish, so he and I just sang the hymns in Spanish, whereas the SOS was singing them in English.
That's wonderful. That's beautiful. Yeah. That's beautiful. Now, there's something happening in Tannersville, of all places, right?
Yes, there is.
Why is Tannersville world famous? This is Tannersville? Yes, Tannersville.
Tannersville is there's a
Tannersville,
tournament.
Pennsylvania. Yes. What's happening there?
There's a tournament every year. The World Karate Hall of Fame has a tournament.
The World Karate Hall of Fame has a tournament every year in Tannersville, Pennsylvania.
In June.
In June.
Right.
Which is how far from here?
Very close. Very close. About a half hour, maybe. Yes.
So he's planning on coming and bringing a delegation this year. I told him, I said, bring your sons. I said, we'll teach them divine principle, and they can meet the king and come to Sunday service.
Yes. Yes. That would be wonderful. Yes. I'm sure there must be a story of how that championship tournament somehow wound up in Tannersville.
That's the organization's headquarters.
That's the organization's
why it
headquarters.
is there, I don't know. I don't know.
Yes.
He attended 2 conferences, one of which was Father's coronation in New York, and of course the King's coronation at that time as
that would have been in 2009, January
Yes.
2009.
Right, and he has taken several delegations to Korea to show them Father's foundation in Korea. So he understands Father was a king.
Good. Yeah. That's wonderful. Wonderful testimony. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I hope that they're able to maybe participate in this February 28th blessing.
They want to. They want to. That's the information that I'm receiving, and so I've communicated with him by email.
What are gun laws like in Panama?
Very, very strict.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Very
yeah.
strict.
Yeah.
This, unfortunately, the current government told the police when they came into government, do not issue any more permits for weapons. And both my second son and my third son were both held up at gunpoint on different occasions, but we were never allowed to have a permit.
We
for a
actually
gun.
paid for a gun, and then the government has to approve that you get it, and years went by, and we never got the gun.
The gun is still in the police station because they would not sign the permit. So that's unfortunate. Perhaps the next government will be more wise, because there's a great deal that they haven't stopped the gun violence, and Panama has not stopped, and guns are still readily available in the street. It's the old story of when the guns are outlawed, then only outlaws have guns.
That's right. That's right. Look at Chicago. Yes, Chicago. 600.
Detroit,
Especially Chicago. 600 people last year lost their lives to murder. Were murdered last year. Were killed. And Chicago has a very tight gun laws. It's very tragic, and sounds like an example where a government thinks that it has the authority to restrict our rights for self-defense, our rights to bear arms, whereas that's actually a natural right, a right that comes from God, and it's the government's proper role to guarantee that right. But unfortunately, in Panama, that's not happening, as in Japan and Korea and in many other countries as well. And so it's so wonderful to be here in Pennsylvania, where
Exactly.
we can have that. Yes. Yes. I just noticed there's something missing from my desk. There's something missing from my desk, yes. Which I go ahead and talk for a while while I properly arrange my desk.
Panama, one of the interesting facets of our time in Panama is that my wife arrived in 1997 to be there full time, and I arrived in 1998. And our time there really has coincided with the rise and popular acceptance of evangelical Christianity.
In Panama.
In Panama.
Originally, it would be a Catholic country, wouldn't it?
Right, right. And one president, the son of Omar Torrijos, we were told he would go to Catholic church in the morning on Sunday, and in the afternoon he would be at a hotel participating in evangelical service. And then, that was because he didn't feel it would be politically wise to only participate in the Catholic service. He kind of wanted to have both covered. But now politicians feel very comfortable just being evangelical Christians. But at the same time, because of corruption in Panama, the problem has become one that sometimes I struggle with I speak better Spanish than I do English now, but drug dealers want to get involved in churches to launder money. And different churches, even large churches, have had problems with this because drug dealers will donate land and then ask to be paid for the land out of donations from the church to be able to launder their money. So we've seen where the initial enthusiasm, people having a deep, profound spiritual experience in evangelical churches, Pentecostal services, has been replaced by a very corrupt effort on the part of some pastors to steal churches from other pastors because they look at them as potential laundries for the money from drug dealers.
I see.
It's a very ugly side of this changeover, opening up of people to evangelical Christianity.
Well, tell us more about, because you're continental leader in the under the King for Central America. So tell us about other countries in Central America that you've been working with and what's going on there.
Okay, Mexico, we were also missionaries in Mexico for 10 years. We were 2 years in Chile, wonderful country, and then we were missionaries 10 years in Mexico. And the mission in Mexico was always also very special because we were able at the beginning to find a very wonderful Mexican woman who had terrific enthusiasm. And the fact that there was a Mexican movement was really largely due to her enthusiasm and her energy and attractiveness in getting members. And she has an English husband, and they became sanctuary members, and now are the sanctuary coordinators for Mexico. Because so many of the members in Mexico know, their descendants
Their lineage.
spiritually from her, then she has a great credibility, and she's been able to pull along and influence members there to look at what the King is saying and to be able to understand the errors of the Han Mother's thinking. So she's very dynamic there, very active, and that's our largest congregation in Central America and Mexico, primarily in 3 states, but expanding.
Wonderful, wonderful. You hear so much about the violence in Mexico. I think yesterday or day before we had an article that something like half of Mexico is now sort of controlled by or somehow occupied by or heavily influenced by drug cartels, and that there were a lot of murders last year. I've forgotten the number there, but a lot of people were killed. And there's a lot of of violence there. I guess in Mexico as well. Maybe you can tell me, what are the gun laws like in Mexico? Do you happen to know?
They're restrictive. I couldn't tell you exactly. That was not something that we were really focused on during our time there.
Let me just see if...
But one of the interesting things about Mexico is it's, in a way, it's sad because Mexico is our very large southern neighbor, but we're not really educated in school to appreciate the incredible culture of Mexico. It's extremely rich archaeologically, as rich or more rich perhaps than Egyptian culture. We have pyramids that are larger than the pyramids in Egypt and Mexico, if people want to go to a pyramid. And there are many different cultures. Mexico, in different regions of Mexico. So Mexico always has been a country of groups that are held together. It's very much a federalist a type of system. So the fact that there are criminal gangs that dominate particular regions is, in a sense, not so different than the past when different Indian cultures dominated different regions.
I see.
It's been a country held together by some sense of nationalism, some sense of a common language, and the fact that the Aztecs united the empire. But each region has a distinct flavor.
Just looking at the Wikipedia article on gun laws in Mexico, a common misperception is that firearms are illegal in Mexico and that no person may possess them. This belief originates due to the general perception that only members of law enforcement, the armed forces, or those in armed security protection are authorized to have them. While it is true that Mexico possesses strict gun laws where most types and calibers are reserved to the military and law enforcement, the acquisition and ownership of certain firearms and ammunition remains a constitutional right to all Mexican citizens and foreign legal residents, given the requirements and conditions to exercise such right are fulfilled in accordance to the law. That sounds a bit complicated, but anyway, it sounds like maybe it depends on who you know.
Always.
Always. Okay. But anyway, it says they have the constitutional right for certain firearms. Anyway, we hope that can be improved.
Well, we found often in Mexico, I call it the collar system, existed, which is that the laws are set up in such a way that it's very difficult to do much without violating a law. And when you violate the law, then nothing is done to you, but it is duly noted that you have violated the law, so that at the appropriate time, if necessary, then a collar will be put on you. They will let you know, oh, don't you know you violated this law, the other law, and the third law. For example, in Mexico, you have freedom of religion. However, any building that is used for a church automatically becomes property of the government.
Oh, really?
All churches belong to the government. So we had several instances where we had to move precipitously because a federal agent visited and said, we understand you have a church here. And if we stayed in that location, the person we were renting from would lose their property. So we had to disappear and move to another location.
That is
The Catholic Church is very powerful.
amazing. No, I'm sorry?
The Catholic Church.
The Catholic Church is very
They wanna,
powerful, yeah. Yeah.
Make sure other churches can't grow very well.
You can be a missionary in Panama and in Mexico, but you have to have a visa as a missionary.
A religious visa type
Right.
thing. Yeah.
So for just a normal person to be witnessing in the streets, as I did many, many times, was totally illegal. So we went ahead with our ordinary missionary activities. We did what missionaries typically do, but we had to be very careful.
In the couple of minutes that we have left before 7 o'clock, can you tell us about some of the other countries in your under your responsibility?
We hope very soon, when the king returns, to be able to announce we have a coordinator for Nicaragua who has stepped forward. I've been talking with him for a year. He was already sympathetic towards Sanctuary, and he would like to take responsibility for that country. We are hopeful to find somebody in Costa Rica, which has a very large family fed.
That's where the head of Family Fed and the Korean leader
The
for the
regional
region
leader
lives
is.
there.
So we're talking with people there, and always looking for an appropriate person for Costa Rica. The Family Fed really has no presence in El Salvador, and the presence in Honduras and Guatemala is also very small. So Mexico is the biggie. We're very happy that we have an active and vigorous outreach going on there.
Not to mention Panama.
And Panama, yeah. And I should mention the members in Panama, their excellent support. The church divided in Panama. Most of the members stayed with Sanctuary, even though the church building, the peace embassy, was occupied by the regional leader. It's interesting, they tried to take over the peace embassy. The regional leader tried to have himself installed as one of the directors, and a Costa Rican member who's married to a Panamanian, they tried to install as another director so they could control the organization and control the building. And my wife pointed out to the national leader of Family Fed, that's illegal in Panama. You cannot have foreign directors of a NGO. So the regional leader was not able to install his planned group in control, having Costa Ricans control the Family Fed in Panama. But they do have
More than half the members in Panama are with the king.
stayed with the king.
Wow.
So they work under the handicap that we don't have a building which belongs to us, and we just have to meet in private homes. But despite that, they've been able to evangelize and bring new people.
Oh, that's amazing. More than half. So the majority of Family Fed members, Unification Church members in Panama, have remained with Father's lineage and remained with the second king. That's wonderful. That's wonderful news.
Really, really good members.
that's
Wonderful.
And wow, thank you very much for the work that you've been doing there, and we look forward to all that you can, all that you'll be doing here directly with the king. You're just getting settled. I know that you've purchased a house. You've been in process of moving and trying to get your driver's license, and you know, I've been through this experience of coming back to the United States, and it's not easy because America assumes that once people come, they don't want to leave. So people who leave and come back, it doesn't compute. It doesn't compute. So I know that you must be going through difficulties there. But gradually,
One thing is the weather.
One thing is the weather. Okay, yes.
Panama.
Panama to yes. Well, shall we see what is the let's get the AccuWeather forecast for Panama City right now. AccuWeather.com, Panama.
80
Not
degrees.
not Panama. Let's
High
see what you left
100.
behind. AccuWeather forecast. Let's see what you left behind. 89 degrees. Yes, today a high of 89 degrees. Tonight a low of 72.
Oh, my goodness, it's going to be a cool day.
It's going to be a cool day. Yes, yes. Actually, later this week, later it'll be in the 90s. All next week. Okay. All right. Let's take a break and we'll come back. And I think we'll start going through more of the news because there are other things happening in the world when we come back. Thank you, Regis and Nancy.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, February 3rd, 2018. Tim Elder and Regis and Nancy Hanna in for the second king of Cheongguk, Hyung Moon. And we just, during the last hour, heard their wonderful testimony about their experience in Panama, Mexico, Chile. You were also in Chile for a couple of years, and all that is going on there now. It was wonderful to hear that a majority of the Family Federation members in Panama are now in the True Father's authority. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Other things going on in the world today. Yesterday was the first Friday of the month, and so the Labor Department announced labor statistics for January, and it was good or bad, depending on your situation. The United States added 200,000 jobs, which was more than what the experts had expected. They were expecting 180,000, so it was more than that. The unemployment rate held steady at 4.1%. That, I think, is a 17-year low. And average work week unexpectedly falls from 34.3 hours to 34.3 from 34.5. Well, one thing that happened was that the average wages went up by 2.9% from a year earlier. That was the most since June of 2009. So that was also the best in almost 9 years. So the reaction of the markets to this was that the Dow fell by more than 600 points. Sometimes the good news is bad, all right? And the reason is that when news like this comes in, where it shows that the U.S. economy is growing, in fact, the growth of the economy is accelerating after Obama left office and Trump took office, then the fear is that the Federal Reserve Board is going to start raising rates, and that will make it more difficult for companies to borrow, and also more difficult for people who are buying stocks to borrow, or at least they will have to pay more money in interest in order to borrow. And so often the stock market will go down after a better than expected report like this. So good is bad and bad is good sometimes. That's how it works.
Well, the Federal Reserve has to raise interest rates. I was a stockbroker for 8 years. Mm-hmm. The Federal Reserve has to raise interest rates, because if they do not raise interest rates the next time there's a recession, they have no bullets to shoot. Mm-hmm. So they're in a difficult situation.
Well, all right. So I didn't realize that you were a stockbroker for how many years?
4 years and then 4 years again. I did it twice.
All right. So let's talk about the Cheongguk Constitution prohibition against central banks.
Oh, excellent.
Why is that? Why is that excellent?
Well, because basically banks.
So the Federal Reserve will be abolished.
Yes.
Abolished.
Yes.
And why is that good?
Well, because central banks basically print money. People say, well, how can you print money? Well, they have the authority, literally, to run printing presses and to print money. But you think, well, how much dollar bills or $20 bills or $100 bills? Well, that's not the most effective way they print money. The most effective way they print money is when they give loans to banks. And this week is what we call fiat money. People say fiat money. That's a fiat. Fiat is a car. What are they talking about? Is this car money? What is a fiat money? Well, fiat money basically is you just instantly say, here's some money. Yes. Why is it some money? Because I said it's some money.
Here, this is a $1,000 bill.
Exactly. And there's nothing behind it. Yes. They say, well, wait a minute, there's the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. Okay, and who's in back of the full faith and credit of the U.S. government?
Used to be gold, but not anymore.
Not anymore. Used to be you had a silver certificate on that dollar bill. You don't have that anymore.
Right.
You can go to the Federal Reserve and say, give me something. They'll say, well, what would you like? Here's another one. There's nothing behind it whatsoever.
More likely they'll give you a bond.
Right.
Yes.
So absolutely, getting rid of the Federal Reserve. It's not only that. The Federal Reserve System, and a lot of people don't realize this, is that these banks are privately owned.
The Federal Reserve.
The Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, the Federal Reserve Bank of Colorado, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Those Federal Reserve banks are privately owned banks, which means people own stock in them. And you have a certain family called the Rothschild family, which happens to own stock in all of them around the world, except in some little countries that don't have central banks and don't want to have a central bank, which are Muslim countries.
Let me tell you something that I learned in Econ 101 in college and get you to respond to it. That is that there is this business cycle, all right? We have boom and busts. And it's the Federal Reserve, the Federal Reserve sort of smooth things out by controlling interest rates. Is that true?
That's what they think they do.
Okay.
That's what they.
What do they actually do?
That's what they want you to believe that they're
Right.
doing.
Okay.
Everybody in government wants to believe that they're providing a necessary function.
Yes.
And if they were not there, then the world would fall apart. Now, in certain special cases, like a fire department, it's true they have some heavy equipment that most of us don't have. And if a large building is ablaze, only the fire department could put out the blaze. But in reality, is it necessary, all of this finagling that the central bank does? What would happen if they weren't there? Would the government survive?
yeah.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the Federal Reserve System was begun at the beginning of the 20th century, and the country survived beautifully before that time. So obviously it's not necessary for our economy to work. They have a central bank. Panama does not have a central bank,
Ah.
and they use the U.S. dollar.
Well, then their interest rates then are effectively controlled by the U.S. then, isn't it? Wouldn't that be the case? Or how does that work?
No.
They use the U.S. dollar in Panama.
They use the U.S. dollar. Basically, it means that the country can't, they have a fixed number of dollars at any one time. They can export to get dollars. They can charge money for boats going through the Panama Canal, which they do. And insurance companies operate in Panama. And there are banks. They have a very active banking sector in Panama, which attracts deposits from the U.S. But they cannot physically create fiat money.
So how are interest rates determined in Panama?
By the market.
By the market. Wow. Okay, that's a revolutionary idea. By the market. And does it work well?
Well, that depends. The banking system, we do have banks that go belly up. It happens.
Well,
I wish I
not-
could
not
say
all,
it's rare,
not-
but
yeah.
it happens probably every 5 years. We were there 20 years, and probably we saw every 5 years we saw one go under or
well,
two.
banks go under in the United States too.
Yes,
all
they
the
do
time.
also.
Yes.
Yes, they do also. But banks there do charge fees that are exorbitant for certain international transactions. For example, bank wires are extremely expensive.
Yes, I see here that according to the FDIC, that's the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation,
That's
there
right.
were 8 bank failures in the United States during 2017. Yeah.
Which were covered by them. We don't have FDIC insurance in Panama. When the bank goes under, then we say the depositors take a haircut. It means they get back less than they had on deposit.
Yeah. So anyway, that's very interesting. So in the United States too, if the Federal Reserve were abolished, if we got rid of the Federal Reserve Board, do you think that interest rates could be determined by the market?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Why not?
And so in the current situation, for example, let's go through how that would work. Current situation, with the tax cut, with the tax reform, companies have more money.
Well, companies have more money also because with the tax reform, they're able to repatriate
Right.
these billions and hundreds of billions of dollars they have stashed overseas that they were unwilling to repatriate because of the abusive corporate tax rate in America.
So for many reasons, they have more money.
Yes.
Because they're paying less taxes, because because big companies are bringing money back from overseas, and they're, I guess, and yet interest rates are going up. Normally, when you have more money, then you have greater supply, and if with a greater supply, and then the price would go down. In other words, interest rates would go down.
Right.
But I guess that's because the demand for money must be going up then faster than the supply of money. In other words, the desire of corporations to invest, or the desire of people to spend the money that they have, the desire, the need for capital, the demand for capital by companies must be going up there faster. That's what's pushing interest rates up.
No, the Federal Reserve is simply saying that if you go to them and ask them for a loan, then they are going to charge this amount. And they will engage in what is called open market
Right.
activity, which means they're buying and selling for their own account securities, and they will buy whatever they have to buy to push interest rates up.
And
They're manipulating.
they're manipulating. Yes, in fact, the Federal Reserve is expected to raise its key rates when it meets in March.
Yes.
Even now, as you said, even on a daily basis, and they do this recently by what they do with bonds.
Yes.
So they manipulate the money supply by either buying or selling government bonds. And so the stock market yesterday plunged more than 600 points. That's the Dow Jones Industrial Index plunged by more than 600 points, which sounds like a lot, but it actually is just over 2%. And 2% is, of course, a hefty fall, but it's not a. I mean, you were a stockbroker.
Right.
Yeah.
When you're at 26,000, it's not a whole lot.
Yeah.
But keep in mind that there were several days, the last 10 days, when it went up by 200 or 300 points. So this volatility could very well be a sign that it's reaching a top.
And I think more and more people are feeling that way. And so
There's been a lot of small investors who are being sucked into the market. They're
Right.
afraid they're missing out on something, and in reality, they're buying at a top.
and so because people are beginning to feel that we're at a top, and so people are selling more and more.
They
and
should
trying
be.
to sell. They should
They
be.
should be.
President, one thing that President Trump has been mentioning that the African American unemployment is the lowest it's been since records are being kept, but now that's no longer the case. It went up 0.9%. So he probably won't be saying that at least for the next month. We'll see.
That's unfortunate.
We'll see what he says. What happens the next month? But yeah, I don't know why that number shot up like that. 0.9% increase in African American unemployment. Treasury yields and the dollar gained, while stock futures remain lower as the data reinforced the Fed's outlook for the 3 interest rate hikes this year under incoming Chairman Jerome Powell, including one that investors expect in March. The figures may also add to the likelihood of a 4th rate increase in 2018. The report puts the nation closer to a maximum employment, one of the goals of the Federal Reserve, and sets a solid tone for hiring this year following continued gains in payrolls in 2017. That could be starting to generate a long-awaited, sustained pickup in wages and boost demand in this expansion, which may also get a lift this year from tax cut legislation signed by President Donald Trump in December. The gain in wages will add to concerns that inflationary pressures are building in the economy, said Michael Farrell, chief U.S. economist of J.P. Morgan Chase & Company, who's correctly projected the payrolls gain. It solidifies expectations that the Fed will hike in March. The question is, what will they signal for hikes after that? And so everybody's looking at the Fed and not at the free market, because it's the Fed that determines rates and not the free market.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then they say, okay, full employment is our goal, and also our goal is to keep inflation in check, not to eliminate the inflation, because they're also even more afraid of deflation than they are of inflation. But inflation really eats into the value of the dollar, doesn't it?
It does, but they on the other hand, in a somewhat ironic sense, they have a goal of 2% inflation. They want
Yes.
to see a minimum of 2%
Yes.
inflation because they're terrified of deflation.
They are terrified of deflation, which is what actually Japan had. But Japan survived that. Japan has had they've been sort of not a serious deflation, but they've sort of had a
Yes,
they had quite a large, especially in the real estate market in
Yes.
Japan. There's been a very tremendous deflation where banks with loans for mortgages found that the underlying real estate value went down by half, or even went down by even more than that.
Right.
And so that they call it the lost decade in Japan. And people seem to be afraid that something like that could happen here as well.
I think it already has happened because you had the housing crisis in 2008, and many people, their houses are just now getting back to where they were in 2008.
Yeah. Okay, so there are other details here, but we don't need to go into all of this. The inflation rate, I think, was one of the things that they were looking at. And I can't seem to find that number, but yeah, I think it was
It's around 2%.
It was a little bit higher than 2%. I think it was at 2.5%, 2.5% last year. I think I saw somewhere where it ticked up a little bit above that, and I think that's why the Fed is getting ready to say, here, this is where we need to come in and raise interest rates so as to suppress growth. We don't want it growing too fast.
Well, they have a contradictory mission because their mission is, on the one hand, full employment. If everybody's employed, then that's automatically going to create inflation.
Yes.
But they have to control inflation and try to seek full employment. That's like driving with your foot on the gas and on the brake at the same time.
Yes. Which some people do, but here, over the same period, the consumer price index gained 2.1%, seasonally adjusted, but rising. So I see. So you're right. It's 2.1% over the since January of last year. That was inflation. That was lower than I had thought. Perhaps push the Fed inflation hawks to raise rates faster. After 2 years of tracking sideways at about 2.5%. We can't stress enough that a substantial upside break in wage growth will greatly empower Fed hawks and weaken the doves, Ian Shepherdson of Pantheon Macroeconomics said in a client note. In short, the labor market is tight, getting tighter, and employees are becoming more expensive. The question for the Fed now is whether the plan for gradual tightening will be enough if wage gains accelerate further. Stocks open lower, and et cetera. Yeah, so the Fed they want growth, but not a lot of growth, and there's been talk that this may be part of the effort to undermine President Trump's presidency, to bring the market up to a certain point and then let it boom fall. We'll have to see what happens Monday, because the stock market fell by 600 points on Friday, and some are predicting that bad Friday leads to an even worse Monday.
Could be. I think I haven't heard any pundits saying this, but from a sentiment viewpoint, the going back to the Nunez memo, with all the hype, certainly I was not the only person out there who probably was thinking this can't be as bad. The media's overhyping it. And when the memo came out, I thought it was worse than what I expected. It was very tightly edited. It was very focused. And what it reveals is the government is fighting itself. And that may have spooked investors who are very gun-shy at this point. With interest rates rising, people may have decided, let's take some chips off the table. Will it carry over to Monday? They'll wait and see, listen to the talk shows over the weekend, and then Monday cautiously take a look and see. But there's as you pointed out, Tim, there's a great deal of money out there which has no place to go but the stock market.
Some people are also talking about volatility. In other words, that people received money during the quantitative easing,
Yeah,
but really didn't put it to use very much.
right.
And so it's being held. And so volatility is you take a single dollar, and then if I keep it, then or if I just keep it, then there's no volatility then. But if I use it, and then you use it, and then you use it, and then you use it, then a single dollar can be used in various, in many different transactions. And what people are saying is that the volatility of money may be increasing. That is, the people are actually starting to use the money that they have. They're no longer keeping it wherever they keep cash.
Velocity of money.
Yeah.
Right. Velocity of money.
I'm sorry, not volatility. Velocity of money.
Yeah, exactly.
Terms mixed up there.
This is
Velocity of money.
Yeah, this is a very good point.
Yes, and that effectively increases the money supply.
Yes, it does.
Yes, so that's something that the Fed cannot. That's something that's not in their control, actually.
It's not, and I think this is one of the threats of the cryptocurrencies, because the cryptocurrencies, one of their advantages is that they settle transactions very quickly, and that is a threat to velocity of money.
Yes, and actually the threat of cryptocurrencies is that it makes the central bank irrelevant. Isn't
It does.
Right? Johnny Cook outlaws central banks, and all of a sudden we have cryptocurrencies coming up that makes you say, well, what's the central bank for? And this is actually they're trying more and more to control cryptocurrencies.
Yes.
And South Korea is trying it because cryptocurrencies have become something of a fad in South Korea, and for very psychological reasons, I guess. And a lot of people have put their money in it, and so the government is, trying to put various restrictions on it. We'll see how well they succeed. Oh, you can't do it anonymously, this kind of thing. Oh, people under 21 can't do it.
Right.
We'll see. Well, it's very much in its infancy, but it seems that over the long term, it may make central banks irrelevant. That would be very interesting. Let's go through some of the other headlines here. Apparently there's a football game happening tomorrow, but we'll skip over those. People who want to watch that will, I'm sure, know what's going on there. Asian pushes baseball spring training boycott, baseball too. Doctors select first women to have 3-person babies. What do you think of that? 3 people giving birth to 1 baby.
Science makes many things possible. It doesn't
Yes.
necessarily mean you should do it.
Well, yes, and it needs the Judeo-Christian ethic to guide it.
Yes.
A couple of days ago we had a report about how human beings and large apes scientifically could create a baby.
Yeah. Human Z.
Yeah. Doctors in Newcastle have been granted permission to create Britain's first 3-person babies for 2 women who are at risk of passing on devastating and incurable genetic diseases to their children. The green light from the fertility regulator means that doctors at the Newcastle Fertility Center will now attempt to make healthy embryos for the women by merging fertilized eggs through standard IVF and DNA from female donors. So they are at risk. These women are at risk of passing on devastating and incurable genetic diseases. So they've been given the green light to have 3-person babies. Let's see. Let me see what all is involved here. Minutes from the HFEA's approval committee reveal that the 2 women carry mutations in a gene that causes a rare condition known as they have a problem. Okay. So having reviewed the women's medical and family histories, the HFEA committee agreed that any children they conceived may be affected by serious multi-systemic and progressive disease, which would severely affect their quality of life. Neither woman was deemed suitable for an IVF procedure called pre-implantation. So they're going to take mother's fertilized egg, donor's fertilized egg, donor egg. So they're combining 3 eggs. I thought it was 2 men and 1 woman. No, there's 3 women, and creating an egg together. That's interesting. 3 women come together to create a single egg. All right, we'll see where that leads. It doesn't sound very good. The child is going to say, "Mommy number 1, mommy number 2, mommy number 3." I have 3 mommies. Let's see. We have more sexual harassment charges. Let's see. We have chaos, secrecy, and hope at LA Times. That newspaper has been going through some chaotic situations. Whole body to be replaced or upgraded with robot parts. There you go. Whole body to be replaced or upgraded with robot parts. They won't have human rights under the Chinese Constitution, I'm afraid, because they have to be genetically unmodified to have human rights under the Constitution. Trump approval pops to 49%. Rats develop rare cancer from cell phone exposure. So who's giving cell phones to rats? 60 more children dead from the flu. I think in southern climates, do they have problems with the flu?
We have some tropical viruses that are very nasty.
Yes.
But flu, a little bit.
Mm-hmm. 16 flu-related deaths were reported Friday by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in its weekly flu report. This brings the total number of pediatric flu-related deaths to 53 for the season, which began in October. According to the report, influenza activity is now widespread in 48 states and Puerto Rico, down from 49 states the previous 2 weeks. Oregon joined Hawaii in lower activity levels for the week ending January 27th. Okay, so let's be careful for that. Ice sweeps hit 77 Northern California workplaces. I think because California declared itself to be a sanctuary state, in other words, they will not cooperate with federal immigration authorities, and so federal immigration authorities are kind of focusing their efforts on California for that reason, it seems. So I think California actually is probably giving up more immigrants than they would have otherwise, illegal immigrants, that is. Russia developing undersea nuclear-armed torpedo. Pentagon ends Obama-era push to reduce the nuclear arsenal. Publishers abandoned Facebook instant articles. Pope's China bow leaves believers feeling betrayed. Clashes with image as champion of oppressed. Yeah, I think I know what this is about. In China, you have 2 Catholic churches, one approved and the other not.
Right.
And the approved Catholic Church let's see here. I'm sure this article in the Wall Street Journal will explain where Pope Francis's recent decision to replace 2 Chinese bishops loyal to Rome with selectees of the country's communist government, heralding his broader moves to reset the Vatican ties with Beijing, has drawn cries of betrayal from advocates of the country's long-persecuted underground Catholic Church. That paragraph, that sentence basically sums it up, where you have 2 Catholic churches, and one is loyal to the Communist Party of China, and this is the approved Catholic Church.
And appointed. The leaders are appointed by the Communist Party.
By the Communist Party, yes. And actually, I was reading some history, and apparently in Middle Ages in Europe, sometimes kings would appoint the bishops in their country. But in modern day, though, Rome appoints, the Vatican appoints bishops in, I would say, probably most or maybe all countries around the world.
Right.
But in China, though, China says, no, it doesn't work like that here, because all religions must receive the guidance of the Communist Party.
Right.
Yes, the Communist Party is above everything. It's above the government. It's above the military. It's above all religions. And the Vatican had sort of resisted that for a long time, but now Pope Francis has replaced 2 Chinese bishops loyal to Rome with selectees of the government of the country's communist government. Well, not communist government. Come on, Wall Street Journal. Communist Party.
Right.
Okay, it was the Communist Party that selected these new bishops, I'm sure, because the Communist Party is in charge of everything. The Pope's actions in China are characteristic of a leader who has repeatedly. This is a opinion piece, I think no, I guess it's not. It looks like one, but the Pope's actions in China are characteristic of a leader who has repeatedly practiced realpolitik to achieve important goals, but they clash with Pope Francis's image among many Catholics and others as a defender of the oppressed, a profile likely to be further tested by his campaign to improve Vatican-China relations after 7 decades of estrangement. 7 decades because it was 7 decades ago that the Communist Party came into power in China in 1949. They only had to wait 1 more year, 7, because Father says that communists cannot go past the number 7. Another way in which the Catholic Church is sort of cozying up to China is that they are basically putting their stamp of approval on the Communist Party's practice of harvesting organs,
Right.
sometimes from live donors. And
Right.
they harvest the organs as a means of execution. Yes, and those donors are oftentimes underground Christians
Absolutely.
who are and also Falun Gong, of course, and also political dissidents also are forced to donate their organs in this way. And unfortunately, there are still people who go to China to get livers or other organs, not realizing or maybe choosing not to think about where those organs are coming from. The Pope has decided to recognize 7 government-appointed Chinese bishops, according to a person familiar with the matter, in a major concession to Beijing in pursuit of warmer relations and, in the very long term, possible reestablishment of diplomatic ties broken in 1951. As a part of that decision, Pope Francis has moved to replace 2 bishops loyal to the Vatican with prelates from China's state-controlled Catholic Church. Cardinal Joseph Zen, a former bishop of Hong Kong, wrote on Monday that the Vatican seemed to be selling out the Catholic Church in China. Vatican officials now expect the Pope's stance on China to provoke more such criticisms from Chinese Catholics who reject government control of the Church. This isn't the first time Catholics have complained that the Pope has abandoned them in pursuit of diplomatic or political ends, but while the outcome of his China initiative remains uncertain, when Pope Francis has seemed to make such trade-offs in the past, the nature of his long-term goals has generally limited the outcry and any damage to his image. Pope Francis is a man of extreme realism who calculates very much the effects of what he says or does, says Sandro Magister, a Vatican expert who writes for Italy's L'Espresso magazine. In order to achieve certain results, he is quite ready to play down the concern that he otherwise shows for the persecuted and the oppressed. But what doth it gain a man to, what is it? To possess the world if he loses his soul? Yes. Yeah, I think, of course, the Catholic Church has already lost its soul. The King refers to it as fake Christianity. Yes, and the King even goes so far as to say that the people who take part in the Catholic Mass, who take the wine in the Catholic Mass, that is the same effect as taking the wine of the Family Federation, the same effect as committing the sexual fall. So the Catholic Church is way off course already. It is a centralized hierarchy that is satanic and is at the top. There are a lot of good people in the Catholic Church.
Yes.
But at the top, it is a satanic organization.
Yes.
And it is very much controlled by and perhaps even worshiping Satan himself.
I remember when I was at seminary at Malingo, visited a few times, Archbishop Malingo, and because he had a very thick accent, he would sit at the table with the professors, and they would politely listen to him, but they couldn't understand him, and quickly they would retreat after the meal. So with one of my classmates, we would sit very near the table, and as they left, we would grab a seat. And one luncheon, it was just us and him, so it was a chance to talk with him. And I asked him, point blank, I said, are there cardinals who are Satanists in the Vatican? He said yes. And he would know, being an archbishop, these are things he would know because
Yes.
he was in Rome. It's very sad.
Yes, it is
Very
very
sad situation. But what we see coming out with all the pedophilia,
Yes.
it's very clear that the church has become very invaded.
Yes, completely invaded, in fact. And so, and now that it is growing closer to China, birds of a feather, I guess, flocking together. I would say they're both the expression of a political Satanism, Satanism in the world. I feel sorry for the people who are feeling betrayed now, but of course they were betrayed long ago, and it's an opportunity for them to re-examine their faith, re-examine where they want to go with their faith. Remember that it's not about organizations, not about which organization you belong to, but it's about your relationship with God, relationship with Christ.
That's right.
And I hope that people will re-examine, and in the process of doing so, discover that Christ has returned. He returned, and he was active on earth for 92 years, and has planted his lineage on earth, and is now living and active in the spirit world. That would give people, I think, would give people tremendous hope to realize that. The Word of God became flesh 2,000 years ago, and the Word became flesh again.
Amen.
In 1920, and so that now all the conditions necessary for God's kingdom to come have been established, and it is coming. Aju.
That's you.
And the downfall of the Catholic Church by its closer association with the Chinese Communist Party is certainly part of that process of destroying Satan's kingdom, destroying the what Jesus called this world. That my kingdom is not of this world. Yeah, because this world is controlled by Satan.
Yes.
But his is a new Jerusalem and a new earth, a new heaven and a new earth, which will be created, is being created now, centering on the lineage of Christ, the lineage of the King of Kings here on earth. Ukrainian Christians say Pope Francis has de-emphasized Russian aggression against their country by describing the fight against Russian-backed separatists in the East as fratricidal. They say that stance reflects his effort to cultivate relations with the Russian Orthodox Church, which has close ties to the Kremlin. In 2016, he achieved a dramatic milestone in his effort to reunify the Catholic and Orthodox churches after a 1,000-year split, when he held the first meeting by a pope with a Russian Orthodox patriarch. Similarly, Middle Eastern Christians have accused the pope of neglecting their plight to promote better ties with Islam, such as when he brought only Muslims back with him after a 2016 visit to a refugee camp in Greece. His conciliatory approach to the Muslim world, including his repeated insistence that Islamist terrorism is in no way inspired by religion, has been widely understood as an effort to make peace with a religion with more than 1.6 billion followers worldwide. Many saw that approach as vindicated in 2017 when an audience at a Muslim university in Egypt welcomed the Pope's denunciation of violence committed in the name of God. In China, the Pope seeks to increase at least incrementally the religious liberty of Catholics, even by means of compromise with an officially atheist state. He also seeks to unify the underground Catholic community and members of a state-controlled church. A number of Catholics and their sympathizers are bound to deplore that policy no matter what happens next. Whether the rest of the world judges it as prudence or opportunism will depend on its success. Well, we'll tell you what our judgment is right now. This is multiculturalism, which is an abomination. So that is our judgment.
I remember many years ago, Father said that communism was a terrible thing, but there would be a much worse and more difficult problem, and that would be the Muslim religion.
Yes.
And I just, what? How could a religion be worse than communism?
Mm-hmm.
Now we know.
Yes. And of course, Muslim leaders, Islamic leaders, attended many of Father's conferences.
Yes.
But as we know, as he did with all religious leaders, Buddhists, Confucius, whatever, Father challenged them severely to accept the Lord of the Second Advent, to accept the returning Christ. That was his emphasis all the time when meeting with religious leaders. Father started the interfaith outreach, I would say, or interdenominational outreach effort in Korea in the mid 1960s. Even after Christianity, able type Christians in Korea rejected him, and because after all he came on the foundation of Christianity, and you can't get to university unless you graduate from high school. Mm-hmm. Or if you do get to university, if someone just sort of, because your daddy's rich or something like that, and just put you into university even though you haven't graduated from high school, you're not going to be able to understand the textbooks there until you've mastered the textbooks of high school. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I see that in order to understand this textbook, mm-hmm. this university level or much higher level textbook, you have to understand this textbook.
Right. Right.
But Father always, and for his Christians, whether it was Christians or Muslims or Buddhists, Father always challenged them to go beyond and go to the logical conclusion of their religion. And I think this is why Father never objected to Hyung, his youngest son, studying Buddhism.
Right.
Because other people, in the church were very critical, and I think the Han Mother, according to the king's own testimony, the Han Mother was very critical of his dabbling in Buddhism. Mm-hmm. But Father was confident.
Right.
Hey, let the kid do that. He'll find out. He'll come around. And sure enough, he did.
Right.
Because he says that when he
Big time.
Well, he came around big time. Because according to the king's testimony, when he really studied Buddhism, he realized that in the end, it is self-idolatry. It is self-worship.
Yeah.
In the end. Because in the end, they talk about transcending good and evil. Mm-hmm. In other words, there's no good or no evil. This is basically then you're worshiping yourself, you're worshiping Satan. So he realized then that Buddhism was not the way for human salvation. It could not offer a path for human salvation. Mm-hmm. And so that's when he that was an experience by which he himself developed this understanding, and this himself came into this relationship with God and relationship with Christ. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think the really great thing about our King is that he has experienced True Father as his personal Savior.
Yes.
And that is tremendous. Now, he's second generation, all right? So he was born without original sin. He never had a girlfriend, never had any drugs, never had any of those other problems. But he experiences Father as his personal Savior. And he gave that testimony in Korea when he was pastor of the Cheonbokgung Church there. It was a very moving testimony that he also referred to in an interview more recently. And this is the experience that people of other religions need also to have, to experience True Father as their personal Savior, and to develop a personal relationship with Him.
Yes. Yes. And thinking back on we're with Jesus, we're dealing with a historical person, and I oftentimes mention to Christians, if you take all the words of Jesus in the New Testament and read them out loud, how long would it take you to read them? Perhaps 8 hours. Perhaps. Jesus' mission lasted, let's say, approximately 1,000 days. If Jesus spoke 1 hour per day to his disciples, that would be 1,000 hours.
Yes, yes.
And we have just 8 hours left.
Yes, yes, yes.
So it's very sad.
Yes, yes,
It's very sad what we're, and the incredible foundation that Christianity has made based on that fragment that we have of the presence of the historical Jesus among us by His Word. What an incredible privilege we have of the photos of True Father, the personal experiences that you had with Father, I had with Father, my wife had with Father, the members have had with Father, and the Word that we have, this voluminous, this incredible treasure we have of Father's words, which Christians in the New Testament did not have. And yet they built a foundation.
Yes.
How much more should be expected from us?
To me, one of the most frustrating verses in the New Testament is Acts chapter 1, verse 3. and this is talking about Jesus during that 40-day period after his resurrection. To whom also he showed himself alive after his passion by many infallible proofs, being seen of them 40 days, and speaking of the things pertaining to the kingdom of God. And that's it. You know, they summarize everything that he said during 40 days. And those, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 words. Come on. What did he say about the kingdom of God during those 40 days?
Right.
Because, and apparently it was very important because, he had been crucified, he had been dead, buried, resurrected, and he was not talking about things pertaining to the crucifixion, not talking about things pertaining to what he experienced during those 3 days. Where were you? What were you doing? No, he was speaking of things pertaining to the kingdom of God. What did he say? But we don't have that.
No, we don't.
We don't have that. And it's so, but like you say, with Father, we have all these, even though some of them have been corrupted,
Yes.
and I shudder to imagine what they may have done with the original recordings of Father's words. We'll find out sometime, but I have various very, very, very fearful thoughts of what may have happened to those original
Right.
voice recordings of
Right.
Father's words.
Erased.
We'll find out. We won't
Well, we
make
already
any.
know that recordings of the palace, all the criticisms of the Han Mother have been erased.
Well, in some cases, the Han Mother had the cameras turned off.
Right.
Yes.
But some members made their own private recordings, which we don't know what has happened to those recordings.
I suspect the spirit world has a way.
I do.
Right? God has a way of but even as you said, even with very few words of Jesus, the worldwide foundation has been made.
Right.
So I would say that with the words that we do have, we have more than enough.
Incredible.
More than enough.
The Holy Spirit
Yes.
to be unleashed.
Yes. And realizing too that the Word of God is not something that is expressed in the Word of God itself is not something that is expressed in human language. Actually, Father Himself as the
That's right.
substantiation of the Word. He is the substantial Word, and so that is what is important. Let's get through these before we have to go off here. Let's see. Oh yeah, the Pope. Okay, the sprawling Mayan cities uncovered by lasers in Guatemala.
Yes.
Bitcoin bust, half of value vanishes. Biggest bubble in history, says economist who predicted '08 crash. Well, this was not a difficult bubble to predict, right? This was, come on.
200 to 20,000.
Yeah. Actually, at one time it was worth less than a penny.
Yeah.
And the first, I was reading Wikipedia, the first offline real world transaction was when back in 2000 something, when someone bought a pizza with 10,000 Bitcoins.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. Oh my goodness, yes. Because at its peak, 10,000 Bitcoins was worth $200 million.
Right.
So I hope that was a good pizza.
Hope that person saved the Bitcoins.
Yeah, the pizza parlor, the pizza store that sold the pizza, I hope if they save the Bitcoins, I bet they're no longer making pizzas.
Right.
Drought deepens dramatically in Southern California. Cape Town's water crisis hitting tourism. Cape Town apparently is running out of water. I think it's sometime in April that you're just going to basically run dry. Anxious people more likely to be bitten by dogs. We covered that yesterday. Hunter airlifted to hospital after goose falls from sky and crashes on his head. Drudge likes these animal stories. Let's see. Assumed dead dog reunited with family. Anti-establishment movement gains steam. Talk or risk violence. Corsican nationalist. Oh, this is talking about Italy now. Italy. Anti-establishment movement in Italy is gaining steam. Okay. Mosque must stop broadcasting call to prayer, court finds. That may be in Italy as well. Iran arrests 29 women as headscarves protests intensify. Hundreds of strippers protest in French Quarter streets after pro-Mardi Gras club crackdown. Okay. Well, everybody's going to have work. A year after Obama, Dems still looking for replacement. Confused Pelosi says Bush again for the 6th time. Russia probe lawyers think Mueller could indict the president. And Stephen King apologizes for mocking train wreck victims. That would be the train wreck that the traffic. It was basically just a traffic accident on what was it, Thursday? I think when Wednesday or Thursday when the Republican members of Congress were going to their retreat in West Virginia. Okay, I think that's about it. That's about it. Editor of Germany's Bild quits as print, loses out to digital. Cops a domestic battery triggered by Sting song. All right. On Breitbart, just in the minute that we have left, I don't see anything really. Oh, yeah, there was some, of course, people talking about the memo. Fed drops hammer on Wells Fargo, ousts 4 directors, orders bank not to grow. Don't grow anymore. Also in the Chinese Constitution, banks are not allowed to have more than 1% of the industry. No single bank can have more than 1% of the industry.
Very wise.
The idea is to have local and regional banks, especially local banks, that are invested in the community, rather than having these big banks that become what they're able to say is too big to fail.
We're really blessed in this northeast Pennsylvania area. I've been investigating the banks,
Mm-hmm.
and we have some wonderful banks here that are local. They've been local for dozens and dozens of years, and they have not given in to being bought out by a bigger bank. That's a blessing. That's a blessing.
All right, thank you for joining us, Regis and Nancy. Thank you for coming in early,
Thank you for having us.
Thank you everyone for joining us, tuning in this morning, or if you're tuning in later, thank you for doing that. If you look below the video, you'll see some links that will take you to pages where you can find out how to support the Second Kings ministry. Hope that you will take a look at those links and hope that you will give your support so that we can continue. Our revenue for last year was total revenue $1.2 million, and that was the second year in a row that we hit that mark. But the expenses are growing quite a bit, and the expenses are growing quite a bit faster than the revenue. We're doing a lot more things than we were doing a year ago. The King's Report is one of those things, and a lot of other things that the King is doing. That God is guiding the King to do, and so we need to find ways to raise the funds, and we don't necessarily want to rely completely on donations from people. We want to somehow figure out other ways of raising funds as well, and we're doing that. But in the meantime, if you would look at those links and see how God moves your heart, I'd appreciate it very much. Okay.
Amen.
Thank you. Godspeed. God bless. Godspeed, and may His kingdom come.
Adieu.
Jew.
Adieu.